It's Sunday, March 12th, 2017, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today we're joined by one of our mentors, Andrew Su, product manager at Vega Factor, to lead a talk on a new flavor of Agile. So let me just briefly explain the format to everyone who might be joining us for the first time today. On the bottom of your screen here are mentors and mentees in the Product Mentor Program. Product Mentor Program pairs up mentors and mentees all around the world. We're in over 20 countries today, helping people make better products and better product managers than making those better product decisions. They'll be joining us here in the room. And for those of you from the wider world, they're joining us at theproductmentor.com/live. You can post your questions in fairly real time, but let's just quickly go around with some brief introductions. I'll start with the first person closest to me. Let's start with Shelly.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shelly Icona. I'm a product strategist at Onyx Axis, and I'm a mentor in the season of the Product Mentor.
Excellent. And Kenan.
Hey everyone, my name is Kenan Murphy-Sierra. I live in New York and work on the product team at OnDeck, and I'm a mentee in this session of the program.
Benoit?
Hey, my name is Benoit Murray. I'm a product manager for now 2 years, and I'm a mentee in this session.
Excellent. Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andrew Shu. I've done 6 years in product at startups. I've been a program manager at Google, and now I work at Vega Factor, where we help large companies try and engineer high-performing cultures.
Excellent. And once again, I am Jeremy Horn, aka the product guy, and I'll be moderating here today. So as you've got questions throughout the talk, just jump right on in. The way you do that is you go to theproductmentor.com/live, and you post your questions there as the questions come in. As long as they're topically related, I'll get them to Andrew in fairly real time. For those that are maybe more broad or more general, like what is product management, why am I here, those types of questions I'll save for the end. With all that said, let me hand it over to Andrew for his talk on a new flavor of Agile.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, today I'll be talking about how we've really kind of tried to go back to Agile's roots and understand how to implement Agile across the entire business. Specifically, I'll be talking about kind of the typical Agile process that I've seen in my experience across startups, and then kind of how we've tweaked it to make it even more effective for ourselves across the company. Some of the current challenges we've got with the system of tweaks that we're talking about, and maybe some ideas for anyone who's inspired to try on their own to streamline Agile. So we totally thought that we'd made a new Agile, but in looking into typical Agile, so the normal format for Agile is you kind of define your high-level problems, and you break those problems down further and further into maybe features, and then finally into stories. And for those that aren't as familiar, stories typically are a happy path for testing. So what value are we going to deliver to the user? What's their typical flow through the application? And what are the acceptance criteria of the feature that we're building? So after you've broken down your problem into small pieces, typically then you estimate the level of effort, typically points, that it takes to complete the story. And then as a team, you prioritize. And then the beauty of Agile is on a daily basis, you get to adapt, prioritize new bugs, prioritize new features depending on the needs. Now, some of the limitations that I tend to see with this in terms of where we worked and a lot of the reading is that it's very engineering focused. Agile is sometimes almost used as a way for the engineers not to have to talk to the business as much. And this can result in a lack of clear discussion about the business impact and the values that our features are driving. It makes timeline discussions more difficult. Sometimes it's just, hey, engineering team, we need you to work faster. We need to up the velocity and we need to deliver. And also the engineering team isn't at times giving the, for example, marketing team what they need to have clarity for their timelines. Finally, something that I've seen is that the end result tends to be very optimized existing features, and it's hard to drive wholesale change in terms of strategy, or we need to build an entirely new module, or we need to take a step back and remove something. So those are kind of the issues that I've seen with existing Agile. And we thought that we'd, in our new system that we'll talk about next, kind of invented a new flavor of Agile. But in really diving in, I think Agile really did have the core concepts figured out. And the true system that we're going to get into is how do we stay true to Agile's original manifesto, but make it effective across the entire company. So here's what we did to try and create a system that would be as effective as possible. So we started with team structure, and I'll get into this in detail after this. We try to make our teams more inclusive and cross departments. Next, how we actually, as a now wider team, how do we solve our problems together? How do we then translate those quote unquote solved problems to stories, which is what we work in? What are the weekly routines to keep our teams on path? And then finally, how are we making sure that we're improving our process and our features? Okay, so to start out, we'll start with team structure. So the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. So this is actually how we're organized. So you can see here, a quick aside about Vega Factor to help people understand how we're structured and why our pods are the way they are. So we typically go in and we have agents. Also, you might think of them as consultants. They go into these large organizations, we do education, and then we help them bring about organizational change. So we have people working directly with our clients. And then from a technology standpoint, the technology we're building is scaling our agents' effects. It's creating a scalable software that the agents can then use to scale the new systems that they're putting in place across these large organizations. So you can see here we have a pod focused for business, we have a pod focused for marketing, for product, for engineering. And then when it comes to the technical product itself, we actually have about 3 main key functions that we build within the technology. Module 1, Module 2, Module 3. And you see here that I have written APE. And so APE is actually the agent, the product and design and engineering. And so within each of these major modules or features that we're building in the technology, we actually have expertise across agent, so agent and client actually, product and design, and then engineering. And what that means is we can really draw on a breadth and depth of experience as we're problem solving. So how do we actually do that problem solving? Business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. And so now within the APE process, this is actually the kind of best representation of how we work. So typically these are in the same Trello board actually for us. And the top Trello board is our kind of lightweight prioritization. It highlights what's in progress now, what are we planning for the next 2 weeks, what are we planning for the next about month or 2 months. So at top is a way for people to keep track of our prioritization. And then at bottom is how we actually assign responsibility. So we know that, hey, this problem is solved halfway, and right now it is the responsibility of an agent, product, engineering, or design to weigh in. And so what actually happens is we kind of ping pong between these 2 boards. They can kind of inform and help populate each other. So we might have new ideas and we realize that they need to get prioritized and slotted in. But we also know that that problem needs to get pressure tested across the breadth and depth of experience. And so how that plays out organically is someone might have an idea, or a client might ask for a specific type of new feature. So then what might happen is, okay, the agent found out about that first. The agent would then break down that problem, define what they think is the right solution, maybe pass it off to product. Product takes a pass at it, puts out a new solution in Slack, and then engineering or design take a look. After we've reviewed it a couple times, maybe put in a design and done 2 weeks of problem solving, it would go then into the ready for consensus column. Finally, on our weekly meetings, which I'll get into our routine here pretty soon, Then we might have a list of items that we want to have consensus on. And once we have consensus, we know that, we can slot it into the right build order, as well as we'll know that we did a lot of the amount of work required to pressure test our idea, understand its value to the customer, as well as have a clear outlook on the design and the engineering of it. So this is kind of the breakdown.
Quick question that just came in. You can probably stay in the mode that you're in right now. A quick question was, what tool are people looking at right now that you're showing them?
Yeah, so this is our Trello board. And sometimes we keep them separate, but actually in this, I just changed the backgrounds here, but we actually keep these in the same Trello board to make it easy for our agents to use, as well as everyone to know that there's one place to go to basically drive this pod concept. Okay, so this one place to go. This is how we actually assign responsibility, keep the pressure test moving, reach consensus, which to us means that we have quote unquote sign off from all of these stakeholders. And then everybody has a clear view into the prioritization of what we're going to build next and how that affects our customers. So what naturally flows now is, so we have cross-functional teams that can make decision and have the breadth of experience. And we have kind of our key formats on how we're prioritizing and how we're, what stage of problem solving that we're in. And the two tools that we problem solve the most in are probably Trello and Slack. And Slack, there's a lot of files and different things flying through as well. But what we'll talk about next is, now how do we translate that problem solving into actual technical stories? So Agile recommends our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. So we try and take that to heart, and the way that we wrap that up and talk about it is, it's the minimum effective dose. And so if we look at, we had a list of, we knew what we're going to build next in terms of the backlog. And we've already actually talked about it as agents, product design, engineering. So how we actually go through estimation is, I'll take the next key items that we're going to work on, and I'll just write up rough pivotal stories. Everyone's talked about it. We're already decently aligned. It's not going to be surprising, but it's getting our thoughts down and being a bit more systematic. So I'll write out my first level requirements, and then we'll go into the engineering meeting. So those first level requirements will drive the discussion with engineering. But like I said before, because of the previous process, we have context set up. And so what we'll do is we'll just, hey, I'm hearing this. And what we're really focused on is trying to understand what is the minimum technical piece that we can build for an effective test of whether we deliver value. So an example of that is, let's say we want to drive conversation. And we already have a notifications. Is there a way that a notification system, is there a way that we can modify that to drive conversation and test our hypothesis that this type of comment is interesting? And we'll kind of go through that discussion and try and look for the minimum piece of technical build for us to test that value, as well as without creating waste. Let's try not to build one-offs. And so we'll have a discussion around each of the major items in the next iteration, try and figure out the minimum technical piece we can build to then test the delivery of the value. And then we'll have a list of, say, 5 to 10 items that are essentially tests and what we're going to build next. So the next discussion we actually have is, okay, do we think we can actually get these 5 to 10 tests done in this time frame, in these next 2 weeks? Let's summarize what's going to be done. And we're really talking time to business value. So 2 days of work to test this comments. Our hypothesis that creating or enabling this type of comment will help our user, have this type of conversation or a new type of notification, etc. But it would be, we really summarize it in terms of what can we deliver to the customer in the next 2 weeks. Now, if that conversation turns out to be in line with previous conversations, sometimes we're just good to go. But many times, maybe half the time, a new question comes up during our problem solving, during estimation. So we'll actually talk to the business team as well and say, hey, is this okay in terms of sequencing? Would you spend less time? Would you spend more time on this? And we'll have a discussion as a team that, okay, you know what, actually, we don't want to spend 2 days on that new comment. Let's spend 1 day. What can we remove from scope? Or did we make that test ineffective? And if that test is ineffective, what do we want to do now? So you can see that even throughout the estimation process, we're really focused on what's the minimum technical piece we can deliver to test a specific user value. And we're pressure testing that summarization of the next iteration as a business. Next up is our weekly routines that we try and use to be systematic and reduce the kind of rush that sometimes happen, like, oh, we don't have enough stories in the backlog, or we haven't had enough face time, and our agents are typically on the road 3 to 4 days out of the week. So what is the routine that we use to make sure we're getting enough time talking to each other, and that we are, filling out the backlog and spending the right time at the different horizons of work? And horizons is an internal term that really describes, we say horizon 1, 2, and 3. And horizon 1 is maybe this iteration, or at most this iteration in a month out. Horizon 2 is 1 to 2 months out, and then horizon 3 is beyond that. So what do we do? What's the system in place to make sure that we're dedicating time to each of these? And Agile recommends the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. Okay, so breaking it down, I've gone through, and it took a while. So we're on our current release schedule. We're on 2-week iterations. So that means you start iteration 1, we have 2 weeks, and then at the end of the 2 weeks, we cut to staging. Staging is our environment where we take the time to spend a week QAing and making sure that what we're going to release to production is stable and it's doing what we expected, and our clients are not going to be upset. So when you look at that staggered, it turns out that every week is either a staging cut or a production cut. And so by knowing what week it is, we know roughly Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday what we need to do as our pods. And a reminder, our pod is we have 3 pods within our company. Each one's dedicated to a specific feature within our app. Okay, so on a staging cut week, Tuesdays we do prioritization. So this is, okay, everything has already been estimated. We do a last sanity check of, are we comfortable with what we're going to be working on the next 2 weeks? What is the order of what we're building? As well as, this is when the pods actually start to come back together. So meaning during estimation, we actually do estimation separate for each of the pods. Now, this is the kind of global engineering team prioritization on this Tuesday, because one engineering team might be building a service that supports, pod 1. An engineer on pod 1 might actually be building a service that supports pod 2 and pod 3. So this prioritization is, are we aligned on what we're building, and then also are we supporting each other as needed? Okay. And on Wednesday, keeping us honest, making sure that we are spending time on kind of horizon 2 into horizon 1 stuff, basically from solving problems into estimation. We're filling out the backlog with the stories that we have consensus on. This is me writing the high-level requirements to then drive the engineering discussion, which occurs the next Wednesday. Finally, on Friday, we do a pod retro. So we'll get deeper into retros next. But in terms of retro, we'll look at, hey, what did we launch last week in the previous week's production cut? Because as you can see, it's a staggered. It goes staging, cut, production, staging. So did we deliver on our theory of impact? Theory of impact is another internal term that we use to just try and stay centered on the customer. So we said we were going to launch these 5 features. We knew what value we wanted to deliver. How did we do at delivering that value? Did we discover anything that we weren't happy with? What would we change in the future? And what do we want to try and get better at this coming week? Okay, so that's staging cut weeks. And then on production cut weeks, so on this Tuesday, in terms of prioritization, we're actually, if you think about it, this production cut week is actually, you're already a week into, let's say this was staging cut for iteration 1, you're already a week into iteration 2 at this point. So this prioritization meeting is typically just more about, okay, we've got a week left until the current iteration is about to close. Are we happy with What's in there? Is everyone supporting each other? And are we going to deliver on what we said we would? On Wednesday is the deeper problem solving. It relates to this estimation. So we'll sit with each pod and then actually break down the theory of impact, or what we consensused on earlier, into specific stories. The engineers will rewrite sometimes the stories I have, we'll append it, we'll look for that minimum effective dose that we talked about until we finally bring it down to, okay, we've got these 10 stories, this is the points, and then having that business conversation of, in terms of prioritization, are we in line with what we said we wanted to test and what we wanted to deliver to customers. Finally, this Friday, this is one of the pieces that we are kind of continuously struggling against to build a better system, meaning that this pod meeting tends to be an amalgamation of a ton of different topics. So maybe we didn't get as much problem solving done as we wanted to, or maybe we need to actually talk through user feedback, maybe we need to do timeline planning, or maybe we actually have to talk more about prioritization because different things are shifting. This is one of the pieces that we're working on, because when you bring 6 topics to a meeting, it turns out to usually take way too long. Currently, my current approach to this is I'll actually just ping each member of the pod and say, hey, what are you worried about most? And make sure that those topics are addressed, as well as maybe just pick something out of the system that we need to talk about. So that's our routine. And finally, I'll hop into kind of for our retros.
Yeah, so before you do that, we've got a question. The question comes from Shelly, so I'm going to hand over to Shelly to ask her question.
Okay.
Hey, Andrew, great talk. My question for you is, what's the biggest challenge you face with this new flavor of Agile at your company? What's the thing that you focus on that needs to maybe be improved or tweaked?
Definitely. I will jump straight to challenges. Don't be offended. I don't mind. I'll come back to retros. Current challenges. Thank you for the prime. So current challenges that we're actually having are, we have so many electronic tools per pod. It is quite tough. And because our agents, given where they work, they must work in Microsoft products. So all the problem solving that they're doing, that they bring to the group, is done in Microsoft. The engineering team or engineering and product, we all kind of problem solve in our own. So we're in Google Docs, we are in Slack, and we're actually a little bit maybe sometimes in the code. So the proliferation of electronic tools is quite tough. The timeline may be duped in multiple places, and getting people communicating on the same mediums is difficult. So besides being on Microsoft, the agents spend a lot more time, or agent business folks, consultants, make sure that that's clear, spend a lot of time in email with our clients. And so we are really spread out in terms of both our communication mediums and our documentation. Besides the proliferation of tools, we have a duping of feature tickets across both these trackers, and there's different altitudes of tickets. So diving into that deeper, so of course we have, it's a features tracked in multiple places, but even more difficult is the actual, even just words we choose and the altitude. So as our users get more and more, our clients are getting more and more embedded in our process. I don't want to present them a Trello board. I want to present them a story that they can tell. So, a feature is all of a sudden we're building private comments for you. We're building, public comments for you, versus the next altitude down is, how are we choosing, which comment gets shown first? And then the technical level of that ticket might be, we need to build a comments service. And so you can see the different altitudes. That's a challenge as well. And I think that's why product exists, so that we can kind of translate between those altitudes. But that's another challenge that we run into. Next is meeting routines. So that's why I had a slide about routines, is that our agents have such a volatile schedule. It's been extremely difficult to get the right people in the right discussions. We've gotten much better at it. And how we've done that is, it's learning to have asynchronous conversations. It's really getting comfortable with write down a straw model of what you think is the solution. Make sure your points are labeled 1 through 10 or A through Z, so that people can make specific comments directly to kind of your proposed solutions and the different pieces. So that's one way we're tackling that. Besides that, we have the routines that you noticed. So we tend to have big meeting days on Mondays and Fridays, where we're doing a lot of prioritization, collaboration, coordination. And finally, we're just trying to make it more lightweight. I mean, as product, we have two product managers, and then we have a designer. We're in all the pods. So how do we make this more lightweight and not make it so heavy? So even the Trello boards I showed previously, this is becoming a very organic process. It's become more organic, and it's become much more consolidated. We're really trying to only present to each other what is the kind of really key things that I need from you. It's not let me tell you the system of where we're at. It's let's problem solve this one thing. Or I have 3 items I really need to problem solve with you. Can you help me with them? Versus even telling the agent that they have to come here. So that is how we've been evolving. And those are the challenges right now.
So I have a question that just came in, and you can probably jump back to your video for this one. Okay. It came from Julian Dunn, and Julian's asking, how did you arrive at this system and also get buy-in from everyone? Or was it more of an executive decision to work this way?
Definitely. This is, I would say, half and half or 75% executive, because our agents actually coach on a lot of this system. We engineer high-performing cultures, and this is one of the key pieces, is people are finding out more and more about Agile. So how do we make it effective across a business? The distillation that you see here, that was after being able to work on it. And even now, a lot of, like I said, the pieces that we've gone through have distilled out into a very organic process. It's half of this could have been, in a Slack post, because people have internalized what's important. So to answer your question directly, there are multiple articles that influenced it, I believe, like just off the top of my head. Pods from Spotify. There is a book by Billy McChrystal. He talks about just how they actually organized to be very adaptive in the military. There is an article actually Benoit shared with me, which is influencing the estimation piece we talked about, which is minimum effective dose. How do we paint the entire picture so that we can, and you have that like kind of wireframed photo, and that's the first test of, are we delivering the value? And if we are, then we start coloring it in more and more and more. So maybe after this, I can sync up with different people and try and get those articles out there. But so there's kind of a knowledge base, and then there's the willingness and understanding of our executive team, which helps coach on this, and then the actual implementation, which is why at the end of the presentation, I wanted to give some ideas that maybe you could try to just start moving these things forward. Because the concepts, there are things within the concept that you don't have to, there are things within the concepts that you can immediately start testing without getting buy-in from your entire team, that there's a wholesale change into a new system. And so, yeah, that's kind of how we implemented it. This is where we're at right now.
Excellent. So everyone else, keep your questions coming in, theproductmentor.com/live, and we'll keep sending them over to Andrew. With that said, Andrew, take it away.
Awesome. Okay, so back to the retros. So besides the weekly routine, we're in the retrospective. Okay, so even our retros do follow kind of a common course. So our common course is, we have our listed theory of impact on what we thought we were achieving within the last release. I try and jot down general ideas the team has. We've always got kind of a lively discussion going on Slack, and people might pick and choose some key ideas. And then we also have big discussion points around waste, pain. It's like, hey, what really sucked last week, or who's feeling a lot of pressure, as well as what we define as waste. So waste is, did we build something that we don't think the client's using? Did we build a design paradigm or a feature that is a one-off that can't be used by any of our other modules? And if so, why? And so we try and stay very cognizant of waste that we're creating in the system, and trying to avoid creating it or try and basically take care of our technical debt, product debt, talk through scope changes and why things happen. So this is kind of the setup for the meeting. And then what happens is we go in, we talk through each of the pieces, and we might choose the top 3 that are really pressing or really bothering people. And then what we do is we ideate on how can we improve these kind of top 3 distillation of problems that we're not happy with. And after that, let's say we have 10 ideas, we'll then choose and eliminate those 10 down to 3 of, hey, what are we going to do in the next week? What are we going to do in the next 2 weeks? And then after that, okay, great. So, what's been in progress, and are we addressing it? Did it address the problem that, or the idea that we identified here in this first section? How are things going? And then finally kind of a done. But like I said, we're evolving. Done is almost not as useful anymore. And retro kind of almost ties right back into this. So the buckets for us are really, what are these things that we want to talk about in terms of value to the customer, ideas, things we hate, waste, and then also things that we finished. And then we're kind of distilling this entire jazz into our top problems, and then ideating on how to fix those problems, and then making sure that we're working on it. And this whole system that we talked about, the team structure, how we're solving problems, it really does contribute to, regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew, their skills, abilities, resources, and situation. It's really trying to foster a team environment that's focused on the problems. So it's no longer like you missed it. An example of that, of fostering the clarity, is like an agent will schedule a new client onboard on a certain date. And at this point, we've done that enough that the caveat is, we've set this date, it is a deadline, but we know that that person's schedule could move. We know that the client owes us these documents before we can actually launch, and that's conveyed to the engineering team. And vice versa, the engineering team says, hey, the agents are like, hey, you have a deadline that, or the engineer's saying like, we're going to launch 2.0 on this date. But the caveat is, this service is being a little funny, and we need this, and we would love for a hypothesis to be tested even before we launch. So the caveat is, we may not launch if these things happen. And that's just an example of kind of getting more and more to a team mentality of like, okay, we're in this together. We're trying to deliver value to both the customer and to our business. And these retros are, how are we improving our work as a pod? So as a pod, are we improving our processes, how we're problem solving, and what we're delivering?
Great. We just had some more questions come in. First one comes from Matt. And Matt is asking, have any of you ever seen this kind of agile implementation work for content teams? And by any of you, I believe that's you, Andrew.
Awesome. I haven't had the benefit of implementing this in a content team. I'll tell you right now, we're having problems with our content strategy, if you know any good copywriters, but I haven't done it with a content team, so I'm sorry, I can't provide more insight on that.
And the next question comes from Kenan, so I'm going to hand it over to him to ask his question.
Hey, Andrew. So one of the things I was curious about is, when you're working on a really large project with dependencies from many pods, at what point do you reach a place where you have enough defined where a team can actually begin coding? And whose decision is that? Is that made by the product team? Is that made by the tech team? Just kind of want to hear a little bit more about that when you're coordinating on like a really large project with multiple teams.
Okay. Yeah. So to answer the when do you start coding piece, and then maybe we can get to the system part. When we start coding is after estimation. We know we're good. So it's organic. So the estimation, the points happen. We know that it's essentially, we're going to test this certain number of hypotheses of whether we can deliver this value, compare it to the roadmap. And then also, so we're comparing it to the roadmap of what we've promised all the stakeholders. But then the other piece of what we're testing it against is, if you remember, before estimation, we gained consensus on what we thought we needed to deliver to test the value. So when you go through the engineering, things change, right? Like we can't build certain pieces. So if that original theory of impact, or how we view what we're delivering to the customer, hasn't drastically changed, then we're good to go. And that has been a learning process that has occurred before. We just had a pretty large scope change just recently because we didn't notice that we had actually gotten away from that theory of impact I told you about. So we had to stop, take a step back and like, hey, what happened? We did a retro on it. And we realized what happened. And that's why I can tell you the story, which is that we hadn't realized it before, but a decision 2 weeks ago. So a decision 2 weeks ago had actually taken us away from the original intent of the problem we were solving. And then we noticed it 2 weeks later and we're like, this thing's acting a little weird. And so we took a step back, did the retro, and that's what we realized it. So the answer is we're good to code unless, or we're good to start unless we are away from what we are promising agents and clients, and then also away from our theory of how we're solving this problem. So those are kind of the two things we watch out for. Yeah, so. And then was there a second part? Sorry about that. Or is that, was that what you were asking?
Yeah, it was just who decides that?
Yeah,
who makes that call?
It's basically decided as a group for in terms of the roadmap and then the test. And so if we get away from either of those, it's making sure that we're conveying that, hey, we changed this. Do we need to stop or can we run ahead?
Excellent. So that's all the questions we have at the moment. Keep them coming in. theproductmentor.com/live. Back to you, Andrew.
Thanks. Okay, so we already ran through all the current challenges. And so really, we are just at some ideas to try. So in summary, you know, that was, the system was really set up your teams cross-functionally so that you can draw from that depth and breadth of experience. And then make sure you are just kind of have a system in place for pinging the team for their experience. You know, let's run through those problems. How do we define those problems and solutions as a team? How do we translate those problems into actual technical stories? What's our routine to make sure we're spending the time together to improve how our team works? And then finally, how are we doing the retros? So some ideas that you might try to help make Agile more inclusive and effective for you, I hope, is try being cross-functional. You can form a pod. It could be informal. If that's too much or it's drawing concern, maybe just facilitate a new conversation. So list out, you know what, there's marketing experience and business experience that we're not taking advantage of. I'm gonna, for this one feature, I wanna ask those two other folks, you know, hey, what's your opinion? Does this solve what problem that you see? What do you see as a problem? As one example. Others maybe set up a retro. Feel free to take any of the Trello setups that you can see here. Like it's more of just helping you kind of think and organize. It's the ideas and pain points you see, prioritizing of those ideas and those pain points or what you want to do, maybe picking one thing that you want to fix this week. And then finally, really, I'd encourage people to think about a routine. The routine, what it does, it just keeps you honest. So I know we all have really tough schedules. And so what the schedule will do is it's scheduling time for you to at least spend an hour, like, what could we improve? Or spend an hour problem solving at potentially, for example, what I was talking about before, which is the right horizon level. Did we spend an hour this week on current, which isn't usually the problem. Everyone's worried about current. Did we spend enough time thinking about horizon 2 to 3 months out? Do we think and spend time as a team aligning on a year out? And it's not, you don't have to have something super clear, but did you spend the time kind of thinking around those different horizons or problem solving or iterating as a team? So that's what I wanted to leave you with. And I hope this was helpful in trying to make Agile a bit more inclusive and effective for your business.
Outstanding, outstanding, great talk. And thank you to our speaker, Andrew Hsu, product manager at Vega Factor, for today's discussion of a new flavor of Agile. And as always, the presentation will be posted on our SlideShare channel. And also a big thank you from me, Jeremy Horn, the product guy, and everyone else who joined us today in the Product Mentor. A lot of great questions got asked today. And don't forget, if you're interested in being a product mentor like today's speaker, Andrew, to product people of all sorts, please visit theproductmentor.com and sign up today. And also, if you're looking to fill a new product job with a great product person, visit our very own free-for-all job board at theproductjobs.com. And with all that said, thank you guys for joining us, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Thanks.